Good morning, everyone. It's a beautiful Tuesday morning here in New York City, and today we're doing something a little different. We're heading over to the Department of Buildings to pick up some real property records.
If you ever walked past a building and wondered when was this built, or who designed it, what's underneath it all, or if you're just a curious engineer who loves understanding how structures come to life, then this video is for you, as I'm going to show you exactly how you can make a property record request using the official city's portal.
But before we get into what these records actually look like, let's take a quick step back. Hi and welcome to my channel. If we haven't met before, my name is Ilias and I am a structural engineer here in New York City with just under 4 years of experience. I started this video series out for young engineers like yourselves in order to show you a bit more about what's possible out there in the real engineering world. And, perhaps revisit some of those concepts that tend to get overlooked during the classroom. But more on that later. Let's first see how we can locate our property using the New York City maps.
We need to head over to ZoLa, which is New York City's zoning and land use map. We're going to use this website to find information about the property's block and lot numbers. Now, for those who aren't familiar with the terms, what a block and lot number essentially is, it's a system that the city has developed in order to store and retrieve information about properties in its database. However, before we continue with this demonstration, remember that this is a public property database, and for privacy, I went ahead and blurred any identifying information. To begin our search, we're going to navigate to the left-hand side of the screen under the search bar. We're going to type the address of our property and then use the magnifying glass to locate it. Once that is done, we can see on the right-hand side of the screen this panel appear. This panel has important information such as the owner of the lot, the land use, the area, but what we care about is located on the top of this panel, and it's the block and lot numbers. I encourage you to write these numbers down as we're going to use them in the next step. For this next step, we're going to head over to the DOB NOW portal. This is New York City's portal for things like permits and other applications. In order for you to access the record request portal, you're going to need to have an account with NYC DOB. If you don't have one already, it's no problem. You can follow the steps from the official website by clicking this Create button over here. For now, I will assume you have already made an account, so I'm gonna go ahead and sign in over here with my credentials. Once we are successfully signed in, we are going to hover over these BIS options and select Record Requests. Okay, to submit our property request, we are gonna go into Record Request, and under Request By, we're gonna select Borough, Block, and Lot. Remember the numbers we wrote down about the block and lot numbers? Now it's the time to pull out that piece of paper and write those numbers down. Under Borough, you need to select the borough where your property is located. And as far as request type goes, we have several options. We have a folder, microfilm, and index card. What these property record request types really mean, if you wanted more information, you can go into this very nice guide that I provide in the description that DOB Now has put together, and it basically lists different kinds of requests and the kind of information you can expect to find in each of them.
Before we continue, let's lay down a couple of quick ground rules in order to make sure we are not in a situation like this. First and foremost, make sure you're not requesting information for any high security buildings, as that can lead to your request being flagged right away. Another thing to keep in mind is to not flood the system with numerous requests at a time, as that can also lead to your account being banned, and we don't want that. In other words, play it cool, don't be a fool.
Okay. Now we will navigate into record requests, and here we can see all of the requests we have made. For this demonstration, I'm gonna go under view into the request I just made, it into statements and signature, sign in with my name electronically and today's date. Once I do that, I'm gonna click save and then finally submit. If we get lucky, we should be receiving an email from the Department of Building notifying us that the property records we requested are ready for pickup. I recommend going early in the morning as that will give you enough time to do any photocopies that you might need for yourself. And finally, remember to pick up any such requests within 2 business days, as that will avoid having the trouble of making the request again in order to see your records.
With that being said, we are now ready to go pick up our property records and see what they actually look like. Follow me. Alright, we are almost there. Here are a few things you need to keep in mind before we head in to pick up our records. When you arrive, you'll be required to go through some security scanning, therefore bring an ID with you just to make this whole process a lot more smoother. And one last thing, make sure to return any records you pick up from the DOB building in the same day to avoid any legal implications.
Alright, assuming you were able to successfully pick up the microfilm for your property, you might see something that looks like this. You have those rectangular pieces of film and on them you see those little black tiles in different sizes. Those are actually the drawings of your property along with other smaller tiles that might represent paperwork such as permits for work that was done and so on. Now, if you try to read this with the naked eye, you might find it very hard to do so. So, the Department of Buildings provides these kind of optical instruments that look like really old computers. And what these allow you to do is to slide in your microfilm in this area over here. And using the machine's dial, you can zoom in and out to locate the details of interest. For example, here we are seeing what a typical detail for a footing might look like. Note the reinforcement patterns, the materials used, as well as the different elevation callouts throughout the drawing. A thought exercise I would like you to perform is pretend you were the engineer who was tasked with finding out whether this footing can support an additional 10-foot high fence. So how would you go about determining, the wind loads that this structure would have to take? What kind of assumptions would you make about the soil? And so on. In other words, I want to encourage you to follow your curiosity, and by Googling through different forums and even AI, you can figure out some of these design assumptions that a lot of seasoned professionals would do when performing such checks. Alright guys, this brings us to the end of this video tutorial. If you found this video helpful, please make sure to give it a big thumbs up and subscribe so you can stay tuned about more great content like this. I also ask that you please share this video with as many friends and young engineers as you possibly can so we can all grow this channel together and learn more about engineering from each other. With that being said, I want you all to stay curious and I'll see you in the next one.